Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paverart. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile.
Welcome to episode 26 of the Hustle or Bust podcast. Invest or hunker down. In this episode, we dive deep into the strategic decisions and overall mindset business owners are grappling with as we head into rough economic times. We use our current experience at Paverart, where we are embarking on the largest capital expense we've ever had in the past 20 years. Clearly, we are going down the investment route, and we talk through all the thought processes that lead up to that. We hope you enjoy, and drop us a line with some feedback.
The concept that we're trying to discuss in this particular episode is, are we going to go into survival mode, or are we going to go into risk growth mode, or some hybrid of that? My contention is that the way we're approaching it is to go and lean more towards the risk growth mode and getting ready for when we come out of what we anticipate will be somewhat of a negative period economically in this country. Okay. That definition of negative period meaning that there's going to be inflation, fewer people are going to want to buy our products, and how do we approach that as we're starting to get into it slowly but surely, but we're getting into it. You and I have talked about this a lot. We were, for the longest time, at least in this company, small business, started from scratch, took a concept, built a business. For the longest time in this business, we were in survival mode. The definition of survival mode is don't spend more than you have, don't assume more risk than you feel that you can afford. And in that case, we're always leaning towards the negative side, not the positive side of assuming risk. And that's, by definition, almost what most people would consider, at least you and I would consider, anti-growth. Okay.
It's also the masses. The majority of people go into that mode.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay.
Just using the law of the bell curve, that there's only 10-15% of the businesses that grow. The masses do not. They kind of stay at whatever the economy's doing, they stay at that rate. The masses are in that mode.
Gotcha.
Whatever it was historically.
Well, it's a comfortable position to be in, but it's not what I've learned in the last 4 years. That is not a forward-thinking mode to be in. And I'd much prefer to be in the forward-thinking mode. That, although you take on more risk by doing that, and we'll get more and more into this. The best way to define what we're trying to do here and pass along to someone that might be interested in hearing this is to at least let's define what the survival mode is. Typically it would be let's talk about inventory. Typically you're going to cut back. You're going to you don't want all that sunk cost sitting out in your yard not moving.
Just buy what you need for the immediate needs of the business.
That makes sense. Okay. There's common sense rationality to that. Personnel. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with the people that we have? Number one, and if there's less business, there's less product to make. This is all very, very simple and very basic, but personnel is an issue. You have to take that into consideration. Expenses versus cash flow. You and I both know the lifeblood of every business is cash flow. What's coming in, what's going out every month, the net of that better be on the positive side, or you're going to be in big trouble. Okay, you're going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, And that is no way to run a business. So basically cash flow is king. So you're going to be ratcheting back a lot of expenses in order to manage that and keep cash flow on the positive side. There's space, rent. You allot a certain amount of profit dollars per square foot, and those profit dollars per square foot are going to go down. But your space doesn't go down. All of a sudden, you're not getting rid of the 5 pieces of equipment that you have out back unless you're in really dire straits and you got to sell some of that off, and then you got to think about moving to another space. Oh my God, what a catastrophe. Then there's the big one of the big ones, and that's advertising. And we'll get into that more. That side of the spectrum is very much your bailiwick, okay, and what we've done here. So there's just a few examples of going into the survival mode, and, do we counter each and every one of those? Well, I don't know that we counter each and every one of those, but we certainly consider each and every one of those and how we're going to approach them. If you are in total survival mode, you're pulling back everything. You're going into your hole. Okay, you're circling the wagons. If I use one more cliche, you can hit me over the head if you'd like. But these are just some of the examples of the mindset that every small business goes through, and they should. You'd be stupid not to. When the anticipation is for tough times, and it's all driven by the thought that the good times are going away and the harsh times are right around the corner. So let's get ready let's batten down the hatches. There's one more cliche. Mm-hmm. I think I'm up to 5 now.
Should have a drinking game.
That's good. That's right.
The Mike Polk cliche.
For all of you out there.
Let's have a drink.
For all of you out there.
Batten down the hatches. Give me another one.
Oh, God. Jesus. Goldschlager night. When we're listening to the Hustle or Bust podcast.
Batten down the hatches. Hey!
Oh, my goodness.
Bunch of malarkey.
Oh, shoo. So basically fewer sales, means we have to cut back. We have to make our business, and this is the key for me. Underline this, all capital letters and bold. But now you have to make your business smaller. I don't like that idea.
Contract.
Yeah. I don't like that idea. Mm-hmm. Why are we talking about making our business smaller? We should be thinking of ways of maintaining what we have and potentially trying to grow it. And I think you would agree there are ways to do that, but you really have to dig, you really have to look hard, and you have to be smart about your assumption of risk based on what you feel you need to do to not make your business smaller, okay? We saw a major contraction in 08 and 09. I mean, there were businesses in our sphere, the contracting business. There's guys going out of business all over the place, okay? Nobody was ready for that. We had COVID. 10 years forward, now we get hit with another one. That was a government-mandated contraction. If you're running your business properly, you need to be ready for those kinds of things to happen. I know you can't predict when they're going to happen, but you can be ready for those things. That's not what this discussion is about. What this discussion is about is how do we look positive and be positive and think positive about going into a harsh time or a potentially tough economic time, and think of ways to not make your business smaller, but to actually expand it. Is that possible? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I think, Bezos came out with he had an interview this week. Mm-hmm. Some really alarming. Bezos is one of the, again, on the list of top entrepreneurs of all time. I think Bezos and Amazon, they belong on the list, right?
Sure.
We can argue if they're 5, 6, or 1 or anywhere. But when Bezos talks, you got to pay attention to it. He basically went through and said, we are coming into tough economic times, and he recommends, if you're a small business owner, delay CapEx, capital expenditures, basically investments in the business. Mm-hmm. And if you're not a business owner, he recommends cutting out everything and raising your cash levels. I think that's good advice. Mm-hmm. Not cutting out everything, but he's basically saying liquidity, getting cash on your side is going to be better than not having it. You could have a job loss. You could have anything. All the tech companies, the losses of jobs are now mounting into six figures. So that has started, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. The news media has been talking about a recession and debating, are we in one or not? For the first half of the year, they were debating on what the definition of a recession is. And then they kind of got off that. And now they're talking about a recessions next year. So
right.
Recession, by its technical definition, is 2 consecutive quarters of declines in GDP, gross domestic product. In my mind, that doesn't really matter. What matters is job losses and your personal business slowing down or your personal income. Reagan had a good quote, didn't he, on a recession is what happens when your neighbor loses his job.
Right.
A depression is what happens when you lose your job.
Right.
And that's the only thing that matters. Do you personally have the income you need to run your life and do all the things that you require as necessary? But we've been talking about this national recession for the better part of a year, and is it coming, is it not coming? I don't think it's really helpful for a business. Mm-hmm. The business owner's got to decide, are you going to do something differently or not, depending on what you see as the prospects for your business. Obviously, that's in the context of a global economy that you got to consider. But, I went through some of our archives. Episode, I think it was 2 and 3 or 1 and 2. We talked about offense and defense and preparing for this. And we talked about generally low-cost things that you can do. Mapping the customer journey, inventory management, goal setting internally, getting your team aligned against the sales and operations planning process, all of those things. Which I think we've done. We've made progress in those areas. Mm-hmm. In some areas, we haven't made any progress at all for good reasons, but they're just still kind of goals, aspirational goals.
Sure.
But, my thoughts, you're going to be on one of two sides of the fence. You're either going to invest into this recession, or you're going to hold the dollars back on your side, conserve cash, and try and be defense. It's really binary. You're going to be offense going into it, trying to gain market share and grow at an accelerated rate, or you're going to be defensive. Mm-hmm. Clearly, with everything that we've got going on, we are on the former, not the latter. We are investing into the recession and going anti-Jeff Bezos, what he recommended to do.
Why?
Which could be crazy.
Why? Why are we doing that? I think I know why, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, a lot of it's philosophical, and I believe businesses are either growing or they're dying. Mm-hmm. It's really that simple. And growth, is you can define growth a number of ways. Top line revenue growth is one way. To me, it's profitable revenue growth. It doesn't do any good to grow $1 million in revenue if nothing falls to the bottom line, because then you've got nothing to reinvest into improved employee compensation, new equipment, more efficiency, whatever the good things you want to invest in. Mm-hmm. I believe you either are growing or you're dying. I'll give you an example. When I came into this business, one of our core pieces of machinery, we only had one of them. So by definition, machines are great. They help you with production. They become more efficient up until the point when they don't work. So if they break down, what do you do? Or do you still have the ability to produce or not? In our world, if a piece of machinery, we just can't rely on machinery. So some people think, hey, if I buy machinery, I can be into the Paverart business. I can go after that business. No, you can't. Because you need trained people know how to use the machinery and then all the other things around it.
All the processes.
Yeah, so if $500,000 fell out of the sky and you want to buy machinery that we have, you're not getting into our business without a lot more investment, a lot more training, a lot more know-how. 20 years, while we might not have grown at accelerated rates, we learned a hell of a lot. That takes people time to catch up. But we had one piece of machinery. And if the thing went down, we wouldn't be far from extinction if we can't get the machinery up and running. And in the world of trades, where there's not a lot of skilled technicians that can fix these machines, that puts you in a vulnerable spot. So the first part is, now forget about growth. If you go down on one machine and you can be potentially not viable anymore as a business, you're going to invest. I think you should invest in that. And you should invest in that before the sales come. I think you had a philosophy. You weren't going to go buy another machine pre me coming in until you got to a certain level, right?
Correct.
You had a threshold, which is good. A lot of businesses don't even have that threshold. You never got there, so the machine never came. Mm-hmm. I believe it was kind of a chicken and the egg. Do you invest before that comes in or not? But I can't stomach becoming an owner of a business, investing heavily as a percentage of my net worth into a business where one machine goes down and I potentially lose all of that, and the employees on the payroll and all the jobs that we create, all the value that we add to the world.
Makes perfect sense.
It's just distasteful. Yeah. But that was like a 2019 decision, right? Mm-hmm. What we're talking about here is different. So now we've got the first big decision that we made is to reduce the risk in our business by doubling our production capacity with a second machine, right? Now, last year or this year, we went through a period where one of our war horses, that's 20 years old machines, it went down for like 25 days. Now, we look back on that and we say, what if we didn't have that second machine? 25 days, we wouldn't. That is hard to survive. You're going to burn up a ton of cash waiting for that thing to come up and running.
Correct.
We had a second machine, so we can kind of limp along, right? But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, but what if we had a third machine and I never had to incur that 20 days worth of downtime to begin with? Then and we had plenty of business to fill that machine up. So, isn't it about time we got two 20-year-old machines? At what point do we get a brand spanking new one? So the decision over the summer was, it's time. Let's get a third machine and let's make it brand new. But then you go through the whole, do you replace one of them or do you put a new one in and have a third machine? And after about 6 weeks of agonizing over that decision, because we don't have the space for a third machine. So basically I made the decision, all right, we're going to jam it in here. Excuse the expression, but we're going to put 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag with 3 machines. So we're going to get creative. We're going to knock down things.
We found a way to do that.
We had a plan to do that.
Yep.
Into that plan, maybe 3 months, a space came available, more real estate, across the street from us that would almost double our square footage. Double our rent expense, too, almost. So we had an opportunistic thing falls out of the sky that space is going to open up. Do you want that space or not? So now you're faced with a decision. You've already committed to the third machine, and you're not going to go with a swap out. You're going with a third machine, 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. Now you've got the space. You can totally reinvent the business. Do you want to do it or you don't not want to do it? We said we're going to do it. We're going to double our footprint going into this recession. So why? Is your question. Well, safety. With growth, if you can fill up the incremental space, utilize the machinery, that's going to allow you to grow at an accelerated rate. By the way, big assumption. But if you can do it and you're successful, so you want to make that better or not, you've got incremental cash flow that can do wonders for your business. So if you can take your employee base and dramatically increase compensation with goal setting and productivity, that's a hell of a lot better than a business that can't do that. So if you can become a preferred place to work in a small little business, now you've got something special. Incremental cash flow is what allows you to do that. If the owner chooses to do that and values that, I do. I don't think it happens overnight. By the way, this is about 100% of our...
4 years isn't overnight.
Yeah, that's true.
So 4 years isn't overnight. It took a long time for all these things to take hold. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, well, anyway, the short answer on why is the alternative is better than not doing it. The risk is higher, but the risk-reward thing, I believe, again, recessions are a good thing. Let's say the entire market contracts that we're in, 20%. You lived through this in 2008. That doesn't mean the world's going to stop buying our material.
Right.
And the market, there's going to be fewer people doing projects. But if you're a small business, this is where I think being small helps. America, which is our market, North America, is a big place. I don't know how many patios are going to be being built in America. 100,000 next year? So maybe 100,000 patios, and I'm making that number up. Maybe 100,000 goes into 80,000. Well, if we're only doing 1,000 of them participating, so, okay, the whole market might contract. Why can't we grow if we're that small of a percentage of the overall market? So being a non-existent market share, now, if you own 30% of a market and the entire thing goes down 20%, you're going to feel that a little bit more. So generally, a market and an industry contracting at double digits affects everybody. But I do believe the small business can be an anomaly in that.
The lesson, I think, one of the lessons to be learned here, and there's many lessons to be learned. One of the lessons to be learned is if you're not prepared to think positively, expansion-wise, in regards to, a downturn in the economy and your business preparing for when that goes away, the last 4 years has almost been a preparation for that, okay? What's interesting is we expedited the last 4 years, not with this in mind, but successfully expediting what we have in the last 4 years, and this can happen in any business, and this is what we're bringing this up for. Successfully expediting and moving forward with your business, price list increases, management, really terrific management of inventory, okay? Personnel issues, good decisions on personnel, and building a good team. All those things put you in a position so when this occurs, You can have this discussion with your people. You can talk about, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not just going to pull back the reins on the horse, okay? We're getting the whip out, all right?
Let me give you a crude analogy.
You know,
A crude analogy, I was researching a new car purchase, electric car, right? In the summer, right before I bought the business, knowing that I'd have an 82-mile commute each way, right? The gas prices would be a fortune. So I'm looking at electric. I'm like, all right, the economics make sense when you're driving over 25,000 miles a year. The more you drive, the better an electric car will pay off, right? That doesn't mean it's free, but it's going to be a lot cheaper than filling up your tank. So I drove a Tesla. I test drove a Tesla. Wow. And believe it or not, I was mildly impressed. Good car, but it was a 3-mile test drive with the salesman next to me. And I was impressed, but I wasn't buying the car. So I'm doing research on the electric because it's kind of it's not a complicated thing, but you do got to understand the economics, the return on it and all.
you beat it up.
Yeah, I analyzed the hell out of it. Shocker, right? But long story short, that test drive was not enough to take me over the edge and say, yeah, I got to buy this car, right?
Sure.
I'm still doing the math, though, so I was kind of like, wasn't that impressed. Pretty expensive. They're still overpriced relative to the conventional cars. Salesman calls me up one day. He goes, hey, you mentioned you're about to buy that company, and it's, how far did you say it was? It's about 80 miles, I think. I went down there to visit it. I met with the general manager. He goes, why don't you take the car, take the Model S, drive it down there, spend a day with the car, see what you think. I said, you would do that? He goes, yeah, we do it every now and then, and it gives you a chance to really experience the car without a salesman in it. Now I drove that fucking car like I stole it, right? So now I'm going 82 miles down the turnpike, and within 10 minutes, I'm beating the hell out of the thing, and I'm like, I'm sold. Halfway down the Jersey Turnpike, and I couldn't wait for work to be done or whatever meeting we had, and I'm driving it back, and I'm going through the city, got my kids in the car, my wife, and we are beating this thing, right? We are feeling the acceleration. Now, you have an experience, too, because you drove the car. Now, I don't know if you can...
500 miles.
You might not have an opinion, but you can kind of imagine a 3-mile test drive versus really wearing something out. Now, the analogy is the business owner, right? Are you 90 days into your business, 10 years into your business, 4 years into the business? You've got to kind of push your car a little bit to really feel what its capabilities are.
Yep.
A business owner is no different. So I could not come into Paverart in the first 6 months and know what the hell we got here. How much can you push this thing, and will it respond the way you need it to do to really have the faith in it? There's a rule when you buy businesses. It's especially the first 6 months. Do no harm. Don't fuck it up. Right? It's why the Elon Musk thing is so it's entertaining and it's also insightful. He's going in there with a sledgehammer, and he's almost a wrecking ball going through it. He clearly is not going in with that philosophy of listening, which, by the way, he might be very successful. So there's more than one ways to be successful. But I do think to feel a car or feel a business, you've got to push it. You've got to see how it responds. And, that salesman in the front seat's not going to help you do that. You got to go on your own, see how you push it, and see how it bounces back with you. Businesses are the same thing. That's my crude analogy.
It's a great it's not very crude. I think it's straightforward, and it's a good lesson to be learned. You didn't know what you were getting into. Well, you had some idea what you were getting into. I mean, you had a chance to look at the books. You came in. You talked to me a couple of times. You talked to Jeff. You had a chance to basically kick the tires, but you only kicked the tires. And you at that point you have to use your perception. You have to use your the rational way of thinking, the way that you break down whether you're going to buy a business or not. And all that pointed towards let's go for it. Let's do this.
A couple more crude. Let's add 2 more to the cliche list. Philosophy. So you got one philosophy. I think I've thrown you 2. One is you're either growing or you're dying. That kind of anchors my thinking. I believe that growth is better than not,
right,
for all the reasons that make sense, but not everyone's there. The second one, a good friend of mine, shout out to Daniel Berlin. Good friend of mine, he's got a great funny saying, which I don't really buy into, but it is instructive. His saying is, you're not an entrepreneur until you lost $1 million, right? Until you've taken that level of risk and have it go sideways on you, and you've lost money, and then you've come back from it. Where I don't know if that sinks in with that. That is a tough, that is the ultra hardcore entrepreneurial. Mine is different. I believe that you don't need to lose $1 million to be a successful entrepreneur. But you do need to be faced with a decision of not making money in that business, taking all your profits and then some, reinvesting it back in. And we've done that at Paverart. Kim and I have gone a number of months without taking paychecks. It's kind of common. and reinvest in everything that we've made back into it in the pursuit of a stronger, more sustainable business. So that is a test of mettle. For the business owner that wants to invest into this, they got to ask themselves, let's say they made $100,000 or $500,000. The number doesn't matter. What percentage of that are you willing to put back into your business to grow and make it a stronger business?
Intelligently.
None of this
back into the business.
None of this should be reckless. This is not gambling.
No
this is calculated risk.
Correct.
We talk about me analyzing shit to death. That's to try and get your head around the risk associated with it, right? But if you're willing to put 5% back into your business, and the owner over here is willing to put 100% back in, which are you going to bet on to gain market share? The one that's going to invest more in the business. Right. Now, that could be a reckless investment. So I'm not saying my approach is going to be right. I don't you don't know until you do it. There is no counterfactual that says if we only put 5% back in, here's what we look at. You're trying to make the best decisions that you have with the opportunity in front of you. The real estate across the street falling out of the sky, we couldn't have predicted that. But once it does, and you've got an opportunity, do we want it or not? Then you got to lay out the playing field and say, all right, we got the third machine coming in. Now we've got the space. How do we reimagine our business to be completely different? What's it going to cost from an investment standpoint? And then is there a payback? Is the payback 10 years, 2 years? What does it look like? And then go through all that. And there's no crystal ball to figure that out. But if you've beat that car on the New Jersey Turnpike and you know how it responds, then that's going to help you versus the first 90 days in the business.
What we call beating it to death, not a very delicate way of putting it, but we do that with everything around here. You and I beat everything to death. The decisions that we make are based upon countless hours of discussion, right down to the trivial and minutia. It's just, and I love that part of the day-to-day management of this business. Yes, that kind of fell out of the sky. The new space kind of fell out of the sky, but it's not because we didn't talk about it. We talked about that space, this space, that space over there, the possibility of renting a space. We even talked about bringing in to create more space. We even talked about bringing in a beat up, used tractor trailer
for office space. That's right.
To do whatever it is that we needed to do to get more office space. It's so the fact that just made the job easier. That just fell out of the sky and made the job easier, but we were prepared one way or the other.
That's right. Look, we talked on this podcast about surrounding yourself with a mentor of advisors. We had a couple on this. Well, Paverart Pete from Techo Block, he's not an advisor, but he came in 2 episodes ago, and he walked our factory. And at the end of the factory, I always ask for people's opinions, good, bad, or indifferent. What were their observations? What can you share with me so I can learn a little bit? His comment back was, it really doesn't matter because you're taking that space. If I come back 6 months from now, this place is going to look completely different. So any commentary I would give you now and how you're currently configured versus what you're planning on doing is going to be irrelevant. Have me back in 6 months, I'll give you my opinion.
Right.
Interesting, right? And then we have Angelo, right? Angelo was on the podcast, and he came in and gave us a half a day of his time graciously, and he broke down 5 things, and he was pushing on us, and he's convinced that we have opportunities by cutting lead times. So all of this, if you're surrounding yourself with outside opinion, smart, capable people that keep pushing on you, and you keep working it, and that's kind of battle testing your thinking. I mean, that's what you're looking for. Another cliche. Remember the scene in The Godfather? Tom, when Michael fires Tom as his consigliere,
right?
You're not a wartime CEO, Tom. Or you're not a wartime consigliere,
right,
Tom. He basically was saying, we're going into a different time here. We're going into the war with the families, right?
Right.
So you're not that guy. You haven't been battle-tested like that. So becoming battle-tested in different conditions is a function of who you're surrounding yourself with, what opinions you're getting, some of those things.
Tremendous learning experience.
Yep.
One of the things we learned during COVID, and this goes directly to what we're talking about, survival versus growth, and growth in hard times, potentially hard times. It's very easy to cut. What did we find?
Right.
It's so easy to shut down businesses during COVID. Yeah, just stroke of a pen.
Right.
We're going to shut down 20% of the economy. We won't get into all the ramifications of that and the political discussion of that, because that's not what we're about. But what we did learn, it's easy to cut. It's hard as hell to restart.
Yep, and build up.
I think that goes directly to the lesson to be learned here is that goes directly to what we're talking about today. It's very easy to pull back on inventory. It's very easy to pull back on personnel. It's very easy to pull back on advertising. It's very easy to pull back on bonuses and commissions and things like that. That's, it's a no-brainer. Anybody can do that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The mark of a forward-thinking company is that you're thinking of ways to not make your business smaller.
That's right.
You want to grow the business, okay? There's going to be hard times. What have we also learned? What do we? That's point number one. Easy to cut, hard to restart, okay? Hard to think of growing your business during tough economic times, okay? We can cut back on all kinds of stuff. That's easy to do. Hard to think the other way. The other thing is that time tested. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the economy goes up and down.
Cyclical, right.
It's very cyclical. It's the only thing that's predictable about the economy. It's never gone permanently down.
This too shall pass.
It's never, thank
Right.
you. It's never
Cliche
gone
number 12,
It's,
Mike.
it's that's right.
We're on a roll here today. This too shall pass. Drink.
That's right. The this too shall pass is probably a way. That's probably what the episode title should be.
You're right. If we know it's going to come, we don't know how hard it's going to pound the economy.
Right.
But it will pass. It might take a year. It might take 18 months. It might take 4 years. Who the hell knows?
Right.
But it will pass. The question is, are you going to passively wait for it to pass? Or are you going to invest into it and charge forward? Are you going to run into the fire?
And I think I'll put this as succinctly as I can. You want to be ready for when the slope starts to go back up in a positive fashion.
You want to gain share. So look, hustle's a verb.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So clearly we're biased. We're going to run into the fire. And we're going to do it with borderline reckless, well thought out abandon. We're running into the fire with this thing. That's what we're doing. No real shock to anybody that actually follows this. But you're right. It will pass. Mm-hmm. You can kind of ride that wave and just hope it passes, and then you'll gradually progress through it if you can survive. Or you do things differently to try and be opportunistic, to gain share, to build a team. I actually like the fact, I feel for the people that are going to lose their job. But if our unemployment goes from 3.5% or whatever it is today up to 5.5%, there's going to be people that want to work through no fault of their own have lost their job. They're going to be available to work. The talent pool is going to get reset.
Sure.
That's going to present opportunities if you're there ready to grab them.
I heard the other day, and again, this is not a political statement. It's conjecture based on some facts. We have this 7 million people, able-bodied, potentially able-bodied workers who have decided not to, for whatever reason, decided not to go back to work. 7 million people. Okay, never in the history of this country have we had that. Never. The pending, if not, we're kind of in the middle of it now, inflationary period where prices are going up. It's expensive to buy anything now. Nobody's buying homes. All of this, as the conflagration of all this means that those people who are able-bodied and who are working, it's costing them more per week to live, okay? At some point, something's got to give. And those folks who are, for whatever reason, existing right now, as time goes on, as we go into this potentially tough time period, it's going to be even more difficult for them to get by. They're going to be looking for work. That's what I'm surmising. Okay, so that bodes well for companies like us who, at this, right now we're finding it difficult to find able-bodied people to come in here and work for more than a decent wage, more than just a fair wage, at a job where you could flourish, you could grow, make more money, take on more responsibility, all those good things. So getting prepared for that now, I think it's not only is it prudent, I think it's smart.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, telling your story too. The one thing that, this too shall pass, kind of meandering through and trying to survive through it, where times become better 2 years from now, through whatever that looks like. There's a real strategy there for the big global macroeconomic things. I'll give you an example to the point you're making on people coming into the workforce. Well, two things to comment on the macro, which you brought up COVID and you talked about the workforce. Let me give you a couple examples or thoughts and get what your response is.
right.
To your point, we shut down businesses, or the government shut down businesses, segments of businesses, massage parlors, gyms, whatever they deemed as non-essential or high-risk businesses, they shut down. To no fault of that business owner, they got ruined, right? Mm-hmm. Having a little bit of distance behind us with COVID, as a country, do you think we're less likely or more likely to shut down businesses for whenever that next pandemic is? Are we going to be less likely or more likely to shut down businesses?
I think we're going to be less likely.
I agree with that.
What
about schools? I think we're seeing the outcry.
I would love to think that we're smart enough to know where we dropped the ball, and some of the things that we did that were not prudent and not very smart. And again,
but you think it's less likely that the government will take a hard, heavy hand? I tend to agree with that. Now, that's a data point. Now, the insurance people would say the moment you have drunk driving, your insurance rates go up for 7 years. You've already had the incident, and actuarially, you're now a higher risk. The government shutting down businesses, now that incident, that's never happened before in my lifetime. That's more of a risk. But I think the outcry and the post-mortem that this country is going to have to go through on COVID, and was that the right thing to do? I think it makes it a little bit less likely that thing can happen. And that's the thing you can't control as a business owner. But I do think shutting out swaths of the economy, people are going to realize that was the wrong move. Now, it's easier to say that with hindsight 2020 vision. But that takes risk off the table.
Well, hindsight in this particular case is very important, because this whole thing could repeat itself next year or the year after that. And I think it's less likely that we're going to go through the mayhem, the chaos, and the horrible times for a big chunk of our economy again, because I think the government now realizes that, the general populace is a lot more. They're a lot smarter about all this now. They saw what we went through.
They lived it,
and we've realized where some of our mistakes are. And
so that helps. If you've got a big calamity that has ruined people, and you're less likely, to some degree, not go through that, that's a big macroeconomic that you got to consider, I think.
Exactly.
You don't go and invest 100% of your profits or more than that when the government can shut you down. It just, or you think long and hard before doing that.
Well, here's a great example. Well, I guess it's a great example. It sounds like a pretty good example to me. What happened when we started to kind of come out of the pandemic a little bit? Late 2020, and then all through 2021. What was our biggest problem? And again, if I hear somebody say supply chain issues one more time, I'm going to go postal. Okay, but it's true. One of the biggest problems we had was getting material. Companies were not ready for the tremendous onslaught, and it's understandable why they weren't. But the whole COVID thing is not like a recession. It happened like that, okay? Things got shut down because it's easy, like that. Now, we start to come out of this. People are starting to work. There's a tremendous demand for people. There's a tremendous demand for products in this country.
Doesn't feel like a recession, does it?
Doesn't feel like a recession at all. Now, but this is, again, I'm talking late 2020, all through 2021, okay? We're now in 2022. And through the first half of 2022, it was like this also. You couldn't get anything for two reasons. You couldn't find help to build it, and there was just not enough out there to supply the demand for people who wanted to build patios or build driveways or build homes or refurbish their homes. 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 14-month lead times for this stuff. Do we want to be there when we come out of this? No, I don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. I want to be in a position where when those calls start to come back in, Okay, and by the way, we're not saying that those calls are going to go away, because we're going to expand the opportunity. We're going to expand the opportunity to make sure that we're going to cover what we potentially think could be fewer and fewer phone calls. That's number one. But number two, and that's the whole point of this discussion. When this thing does turn around, would you rather be there with a third? And again, we're using Paverart as an example, but would you rather be there with a third machine or with 2 used machines? Mm-hmm. Would you rather be there with the new space, okay, and be able to accommodate all of that extra work? Now you've got the space to do it, or would you still want to, keep shoehorning in production in a smaller, inadequate space?
Well, you raised
these are discussions that are not just Paverart related.
I didn't even bring up. You asked why. Why invest with borderline reckless abandon into this recession? You brought up, and I totally missed it. I'm glad you just brought it up. We are backlogged too, right? So we get, particularly in engraving, that we're pushing lead times out and we're trying to catch up. We had a bad disaster happen over the summer, which we also detailed on our podcast, and we're talking to clients,
right,
and we were expecting to get stuff out the door in October. It'd probably be January, right? It sucks. Doing that and disappointing customers that wanted their product at a certain time, and it's going to be a little bit longer.
Right.
Generally now, we're beating lead times on our Paverart side of the business, and engraving, we're still catching up. That will get better, and we'll figure that thing out. But that really does suck. If you want to be a growth-oriented business and your customers are constantly batting down your door on why can't you get anything? Now, there's only the reality is, in the world of certain segments of our business, there are fewer and fewer people that do what we do, right? And I tell people don't go out of business because they're making money hand over fist. They go out of business because they're struggling and they're not making money. So if there's fewer and fewer people and the demand stays relatively constant, what happens to lead times if you don't expand capacity?
Oh.
They stretch.
Yeah.
So this is kind of common sense, but nobody wants to hear that when they're trying to get their stuff, right?
Correct.
So, but you do have to logic and be honest with people, and that is the truth. So by investing into this, that'll improve that part of the world. You do have to factor in the customer. So some of these contractors that we hear of, they're out 18 months. So I asked the question, why are they out 18 months? Put another crew on. Well, this thing's going to correct eventually. So their philosophy is really clear. They'll take the business when they can get it. They'll stretch out their lead times, but they're not going to expand capacity, put another crew on, maybe because they can't find people or 5 other good reasons.
Is it possible?
None of this is easy, by the way, to make any of these decisions.
Yeah, it's your money.
You're right.
It's your money that
Right.
you're gambling here. None of it's easy. That's so true. But if you're the guy that put on another crew of 4 guys, good people, show up for work, get the job done, do the quality work that you expect them to do and what the client expects you to give them, isn't that going to get around? Are you worried about having to lay off those guys? Well, maybe you won't have to lay them off because you're going to rise to the top.
Back to Angela's
You're going to
point.
be the guy.
If you're the contractor that's 18 months out, and I got a good contractor here with a great body of work, good Google reviews, and he can get it done in 3 months.
And he's got that extra crew or 2.
Who are you going to go to as a consumer? Do you want your project done this coming spring, or do you want it 2 springs from now? You're going to go to the one that can get it done, all else being equal, right?
Exactly.
That's the key. Now, you can't charge $30,000 more. Then other things come into it. Or if you don't have a great body of work.
Those are subtleties that's
part of the buying process.
That's exactly. Those are subtleties that, although part of this discussion, are outside the realm of what this discussion is really trying to achieve.
Right.
That's a great point about that extra crew, putting on 4 more guys,
That's
or putting on
the
8 more
contract.
guys,
Right.
2 more guys. Learning how to manage that.
Or they should be combining. I'd be thinking about it. If there's 5 contractors in the area and all of them are stretching out lead times, they got to combine into one force. They got to acquire. They got to do something. But just pushing out your lead times, then you're kind of waiting for this too shall pass. I can't find the guys,
right?
So we'll just stretch it out and hope we get that job booked.
Mm-hmm.
Competition eventually is going to correct that for you, I think.
Well, now what do we know? Virtually every business in our business has cut back severely. Mm-hmm. Okay, why?
Production. They're down to 2-3 days production. Right.
The phones have gone dead.
Right.
Who are the companies that are going to survive that and survive that successfully? It's going to be those companies that made the decisions to do things during this period. And again, it's an unusual period. I grant you that. But in fact, let's take one step back. the COVID situation it happened so quickly. And again, proves the theory that it's not a theory, it's the truth. It's easy to cut. It's easy to shut things down. I can shut anything down, okay? I can park my car. I can park it tomorrow. I park it for a year. It's going to be hard to start up after a year, okay? I need to still be working on that car. I still need to be tweaking it and working on it, or else I won't be able to start it in a year. The idea here that, and by the way, small businesses, not large businesses, small businesses, there's basically only one stockholder, or maybe two, three at the most.
True.
And those are the people that own the damn business, okay? Those people are also in the business every day.
Yep.
They're picking up a shovel every day, okay? They're going home at night doing the calculations to figure out, okay, all right, I got to move some money over here. I've got to do this over. I got to be able to get. I got to get inventory for these 3 jobs. I got to get these. Sometimes it can be an impossible task, but if you take the time and really do the analysis, you can come out of the bad times.
You can
ahead,
right,
and kill your competition.
Right. You got to have more capabilities. I think you got to be taking. If you've got less business, therefore you would think that is less time that you're working. Right. You've got to take those hours and start reinvesting in other valuable capabilities and or things like marketing.
Right.
If you're paying an agency $500 a month for marketing, considering firing that agency and taking it on yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not technical. I'm not a computer guy. You can go to Wix. Shout out to Wix. They're a non-paid sponsor, by the way. And other people that should be paying us money. And they get a template. Me and my wife did this. Right. We were paying $750 a month for an agency to give me that report when they updated a plugin, and they charged me $750 for that wonderful service. Right. So I said, all right, that's $8,000 here. What is that? Let me take that money, spend it on advertising. Let's go buy a template from Wix and figure it out. We hired a high school kid, and we got a beautiful website. I think it's a beautiful website. You wouldn't know that a husband and a wife and a high school kid built that website, but they did. And we saved $8,000 in the process. That's an ongoing, reoccurring expense. And we funneled that into advertising. So now, a lot of people will give me the argument, you're not in the business of building websites. You're in the business of making whatever it is that you make. Day planners, stationary stores. Okay, what are you going to do then? You want to just continue to go along and pay that?
It's very short-sighted.
So the business owners got to look at every line of their P&L and say, what am I going to stop doing and reallocate and take on? Or is that social media? Is it Instagram management? What does that all look like? You got to do something different. So you don't need to go triple your size, add on 5 crews, whatever's relevant to your business. But you've got to make some choice here in terms of what you're going to do differently and try and grab those dollars, reallocate it into your own pocket, and reinvest. There's got to be levers that they can pull. The website one, just a small, simple example. We did that relatively quick. Now, what did it take to do that successfully? Well, we had to spend a lot of time on it, right? We probably spent, 100 hours, 120 hours. Mm-hmm. But what's the payoff? Well, we'll save $7,000 on the surface. But what if we reallocated that into advertising? And what if some of that works? Now we're getting more revenue, potentially, right?
Exactly.
That's what you got to think through. The HubSpot investment that we made in CRM to try and get better at who's inquiring about Paverart, how are we following up with them, what's that all look like? That's an investment. That costs money. So that's mapping the customer journey.
Sure.
So every business has those, but they got to look at what are the initiatives they're going to take on to try and get a little. You can do things differently and not bet the farm on your business while this too shall pass. And those are 2 small examples: website management, contact management, and social media management.
Advertising. It's easy to fall into the trap that when the phones stop ringing, well, they don't stop ringing, but there's a severe decline in the phones ringing, and we've said forever in this business, if we get folks on the phone, we'll get the sale.
Right.
But when the phones stop ringing, it'll give us a chance and we'll at least get a little breather. Hell no, a breather for what?
Right.
You got to hustle. You got to maintain that level of hustle and maybe even jack it up a little bit.
Exactly right.
So looking into the background of prepping and getting into this growth mode thought plane going into potentially tough economic times and thinking growth instead of pulling in the reins, there's a hell of a lot of work involved with that.
Oh yeah, okay. I will tell you, when you're talking about the market going down, and a lot of the manufacturers are now down to 3 days a week, or there's nothing worse than a manufacturer that has gone from 5.5 days of production to a mandated 2 days or 3 days.
5.5.
That's going to eventually come out of those.
6+.
That's going to go out of the people's pockets. That is a bad spot to be in. So those people that are contracting and now they're running 3 days a week. Here's the question for you: how is their customer relations going? If it's not good,
point we're trying to make.
I mean, if it's not good, then
when you come
that's
out,
not a good spot to be in.
When you come out of this, and people will come out of it. We saw this happen with the explosion in demand. So many people were saving money, and so many things, so many projects were put on hold during a short period of time. Short period of time being defined as a year to a year and a half. All of a sudden, the explosion, our phones were ringing off the hook. Every one of these manufacturers in the concrete paver industry, their phones were ringing off the hook. And it's not just that. Talk to anybody. Who's getting the calls? Well, the demand was so high, everybody was getting the calls, okay? Because of this short period of time, the demand just built up and built up and built up and built up, and it just exploded. Monday's coming pretty quick. And the older I get, those days go by very quickly.
That's right.
Now, I can't explain why. It might have something to do with the fact that from the minute we get here in the morning to the minute we leave, we're hustling. Ain't no busting here. This is hustling.
Right.
And what I've learned personally is that if you've got to complain about something, if something bothers you, if something, it's incessant, it just keeps going on and on and on and on, you got to do something about it. You can't just bitch about it all the time.
Right.
And I think it's easy for a business owner to kind of fall into that woe is me category. You can do that for a couple of days, but the balance of your days, look, there's 365 days in a year. And as a small business owner, you're working, whether you know it or not, you're working every one of those.
Yep.
Okay? You don't get weekends off. Okay? You may not be working, physically working, but you're doing something in some way, shape, or form that's related to the business. You're getting all this shit done over here because nobody else is getting it done for you, because on Monday, you got to get back to this over here.
Right.
That's part of it too. Stop bitching.
And get on your toes.
Get on your toes. Do something about it.
Great way to wrap this one up.
Do not sit back. Get prepared for what's coming.
Proactively.
But think proactively. Think positively. Think, dare we say, think growth. That's the notion that we're trying to challenge. That's all.
Great way to sum it up. You just nailed it with that. It's about getting on your toes and not your heels.